Good evening, everyone. I'm your host, Jason Miles, and welcome to another episode of This is Revolution Podcast. If you're new to the channel, please like and subscribe. Don't forget to hit that notification bell so you are alerted whenever we go live. You know, with this show, we say 6 o'clock. Maybe we mean 6:15. Maybe we mean 6 o'clock. But generally, we mean 6 o'clock. Also, before we start, I want to remind people that tickets are going to be going on sale Monday for the book launch event for my upcoming release on Everyday Analysis. I was a teenage anarchist about the culture of authenticity and the culture of deconstruction and how they work in conjunction with each other to neutralize any sort of movement. The live event is what I call the coolest backyard punk party you'll ever have. It will be in a secret location that, once you get tickets, you'll get the address in the Bay Area. There's going to be a bunch of people from the metal and hardcore scenes. And I mean like old school dudes from the early days of those scenes. I'm going to talk a little bit about the book, read a little bit about the book. We're definitely going to have a fun panel discussion and almost kind of quasi interview with a lot of these old schoolers, and then Q&A. So kind of imagine it as a really cool, intimate meet and greet, if you will, because there's definitely going to be alcohol there because I know you people like to drink. So I'm excited for it, and we're putting it all together, and Monday we're going to put those tickets on sale for that event. So can't wait to see you guys there. And started talking about if we can replicate this event in other parts of the country and world. Also talk to our friends at 99 Zu 1 about coming to Germany as well with this concept. So if it works well in the Bay Area, we will be doing it elsewhere. Also today would have been the birthday of author and historian Jeffrey B. Perry. So shout out to Jeff Perry. Jeff appeared on the show a few years back to talk about his very in-depth biography on the great Hubert Harrison. It was a book that Pascal hit me on, and Jeffrey was one of the big guests that Pascal wanted us to get, and I'm really stoked that we got to have him on the show. I think we talked to him for a couple hours. It was a great conversation. Jeffrey was a great guy. Sadly, he wasn't in the best health when we did the show. And he did pass away not long after, but that show is up about the history of Hubert Harrison. Definitely check that out. Shout out to Jeff Perry on behalf of all of us at TIR. Thank you, Jeff, for your hard work and compassion. And if there is a hereafter, hopefully we can meet up and finish that discussion. And tomorrow, originally we had a gaming materialist show we wanted to bring back and do like a horror theme thing. Tucson has been doing a great job booking this month out with some fun horror theme things since it is October. We'll definitely be doing a movie night again. We'll have a fun horror movie night. I can't subject you guys to that much Charles Bronson. But that didn't work out due to scheduling with the gaming materialist guys, which is great because a lot is going on in the world right now. And I talked to MT and I was like, you know what? Let's do a call-in show. People are going off on social media, even celebrities that I didn't even think were political. And we're going to open up the phone lines and we want to hear what you guys have to say about whatever it is you guys want to talk about. So tomorrow, 6 p.m. We'll probably be starting on time tomorrow. 6 p.m. Pacific time, 8 p.m. Central, 9 p.m. Eastern. We will be doing a free call-in show. So this is what happens when I gentrify White Guy Wednesday. We have a free call-in show. So get excited for that. And that is tomorrow. So, but today we are here with our special guest. It's been really hard to get this show booked. And I do want to say that this is also one of those moments that I feel like we've arrived. because whenever you get contacted by like a publicist, for me personally, it's like, oh, you think I'm important enough? And they could have just done like a random search, like these who has revolution in the name. I don't know how we showed up. I'm sure it wasn't like, in my mind, I want to believe that this was the discussion. It's a group of publicists in a room, and they're trying to, pitch the book because the book has to sell. And they're like, how are we going to sell the book? We got him on all the big shows, but the book is not important unless it's on This Is Revolution. Do you have a contact? We need to reach out to the guys at This Is Revolution. Cory's book has to be on here if we want it to sell. In my mind, that's how the conversation happened. I'm sure reality was much different. I'm sure it was just like a Google search. Is there any leftist podcasts we can get him on? And that's probably what happened. But this past weekend, I had to go back up to the Bay Area to handle some stuff. And in my former home of the Bay, it's the birthplace of big tech, Atari, Apple, Facebook, Twitter, or whatever the fuck it's called now. Silicon Valley for some is the land of innovation, but is it really, or is it more the land of smoke and mirrors? It is through advances in technology that I'm able to broadcast from my home here in Mexico to all of you live around the world. But has the internet truly democratized free speech and press, or has it changed the perception we have of those freedoms? Through apps like Facebook, Instagram, and WhatsApp, we're able to keep up with family and friends. But what happens when these applications, where we upload so many precious memories, become the only way we understand communication outside of our immediate families or communities? We've talked about it on this show before, but what happens when owning media, movies, music, art, is bourgeoisie passion, and most of us are happy to be bombarded with ads and forced placement of artists on listening sites like Spotify. Some of the biggest economic disrupting services like Uber and WeWork aren't profitable, but we see them not as a taxi service or a real estate holdings company, but tech innovators. Are we all susceptible to what our guest calls in his latest book, the Internet Con? From the book, notably, tech giants today are able to wield the law against interoperators, new technologies that plug into their services, systems, and platforms. That a privilege that none of yesterday easily toppled tech giants had if IBM wanted it to prevent its competitors, like the seven doors of the mainframe era, from making software printers, keyboards, and storage for its mainframes. It had to figure out how to build a computer that no one else could reverse engineer and improve on. For complex reasons, this is impossible. The very bedrock of computer science ideas, named for mid-century computing demigods like Turing complete lists and von Neumann machines, dictates that the creation of non-interoperable computers is a fool's errand. It's fantasy, not science fiction, like a time machine or a faster than light drive. Today's tech giants have not invented an interop proof computer. They've invented laws that make interoperability illegal unless they give permission for it. A new complex thicket of copyright, patent, trade secret, non-compete, and other IP rights has conjured up a new offense we can think of as a felony contempt of business model, the right of large firms to dictate how their customers, competitors, and even their critics must use their products. This is from his latest book, The Internet Con: How to Seize the Means of Mass Computation. Author Cory Doctorow. Oh, goodness. Hold on. Please welcome. Sorry about that.
No problem. Hi.
How are you?
I'm good. Your music intro about your gig coming up in Oakland really hit for me. I wrote a lot of books during lockdown. I write when I'm anxious, so I came out of lockdown with 9 books, and not the next book that I have coming out, which is in November, but the one after that, which is in February, is called. Or no, actually, no, the one after that, which is the following February, is called Picks and Shovels, and it's a novel about scams during the early era of PCs in the 1980s. in San Francisco, and a lot of it takes place at Dead Kennedy shows. So
Interesting.
that was pretty funny. My friend Tom Jennings, who published Homocore, gave me lots of tips for the era, and my friend Zorka, who was Jello's roommate back then.
Mhm.
So it's all set against Jello Biafra's mayoral campaign.
For those that don't remember or aren't old enough to remember Jello on all the talk shows when he was definitely running for mayor, and I'm from the Bay Area. I remember him on shows like People Are Talking,
Wearing a suit.
wearing a suit. He was a very serious person, and he was definitely talking about how the state was out to get him. I think they had raided his house at one point, or his apartment.
That was because he had an H.R. Geiger poster in
Mhm.
one of his albums, and it depicted a kind of tessellated image of stylized sodomy, and he was charged with distributing pornography to minors. So it was during Tipper Gore
Ooh, yeah.
PMRC scare. Anyway, this is all neither here nor there, but it was fun to hear you talking about all that stuff. Also, my publicists, their accents sound nothing like that. I mean, they are from New York, but you know,
That's how they're going to sound in my mind, Cory. No one called me. It was just a series of emails, but I want to believe that is the conversation that happened.
you found that text-to-speech voice that was like New York Yenta, Fran Drescher AI.
Yes, that's how all New Yorkers sound to me. Even the black ones, they all sound like that to me.
Yeah.
Well, thank you again for taking the time to talk with us tonight. Really appreciate you and your work. Your work for me kind of coincides with other people that I've read about this. I don't know if you've read Rob Larson. He definitely had some books on this. Weapons of Math Destruction that came out
Kathy O'Neill, very
about
good,
4 or
very,
5
very good
years
writer.
ago. And someone I was actually on a show with a few years back, Zuzana Zuboff, I think that's how I say your name. Zuboff.
We have, I wouldn't say we have beef, but we definitely have disagreements, me and Zuboff.
Did you guys have it out on air?
No, I wrote a book about her book called How to Destroy Surveillance Capitalism. Basically about the idea that like everyone who ever claimed to have built a mind control ray turned out to be full of shit, whether that was like Rasputin or MK Ultra or pickup artists or NLP weirdos. And the fact that big tech claimed that they built a mind control way to sell your nephew fidget spinners, and then Robert Mercer stole it and made your uncle a QAnon racist, just like kind of it stretches credulity. And like, far be it from me to believe that these guys who are like visibly just ordinary mediocrities are in fact evil wizards who are hacking our dopamine loops, especially when there's like much more straightforward explanations, like they have a monopoly, right? And so like, why do we use Facebook even though we hate Facebook? Well, maybe it's like the same reason we smoke cigarettes even though we don't like cigarettes, which is that we're addicted to them. Or maybe it's just because all of our friends are locked inside of Facebook and we like our friends more than we hate Facebook. And it's just like a much simpler explanation. I think a lot of people read Zuboff and think that the part that she hates about surveillance capitalism is just the surveillance is the capitalism. And she's actually quite loves the capitalism. She just hates the surveillance. And she thinks that the answer to all of this is we just make everything the iTunes store. And if you put a price tag on everything, it'll be fine, because everyone knows if you're not paying for the product, you're the product, which is obviously untrue, because like nobody gives away John Deere tractors, and yet farmers have to pay $180 to have their own repair on their tractor kind of overseen by John Deere technician.
I do want to get into that.
Yeah.
So you are jumping ahead. No more caffeine for you, Cory.
I got back I did a gig in Italy day before yesterday, and I got back last night. So I have in fact drunk enough coffee to kill a rhino today. Otherwise I'd be flat on my back.
That is another reason why this was so hard to do, because you were flying and all this other stuff. You had to get it right. But what was the inspiration for you running to write this? Was it just the lockdown and what you were seeing during the lockdown?
No, I've been working on digital human rights for 20 years. So I'm now a special consultant to the Electronic Frontier Foundation. I was their European director. I was their delegate to various standards bodies, the United Nations, the Westminster Parliament, and also the European Parliament. And I spent a long time trying to explain how all this stuff works to people some of whom I think were acting in good faith and were, fundamentally in agreement with me about the importance of protecting human rights online, and some of whom I think were just bamboozling people. And they tended to get quite confused, and particularly as tech got bigger and bigger, this kind of fracture appeared in the world of technological criticism and tech activism. And on one side, you have people who are like, the problem with big tech is that it's still run by the wrong people. That Mark Zuckerberg is monumentally unsuited to being the unelected social media czar for a life of 4 billion people. But if we either like made him clean up his act or maybe fired him and replaced him with a better Mark Zuckerberg, that we would have a better internet. And I think that it's the other side of this is that like nobody should have that job, that Mark Zuckerberg shouldn't exist. We should abolish Mark Zuckerberg. And that as convenient as it might be to say, oh, well, big tech has got all these problems, so big tech could be the solution. Like maybe we can deputize big tech platforms to identify all the people who do harassment or disinformation or whatever actual like real, no fooling, real problem there is on their platform. Maybe we'll deputize them to fix them. And because they're so big and they're so well resourced, they'll be able to do it. Whereas if we were to like shatter big tech into lots of autonomous federated entities where the people who use them operated them, or at least had the choice to go somewhere else because there was a big plurality of platforms, that those platforms would be too small to keep the bad stuff from happening.
Mhm.
And I'm on the abolish Zuck side of this. I want to get rid of these large platforms. I don't think there is like a stable configuration of platforms that support billions of users. I think that not only are they prone to abusing us, but even when they're not prone to abusing us, the small errors that we're all prone to become quite large problems when they affect billions of people.
Mhm. Did this get magnified for you during the shelter in place during 2020?
I guess so. I mean, if I want to be honest, like the biggest crushing moment for me was the European Copyright Directive of 2019. And this was a proposal. Well, it was a big gnarly hairball of proposals, as all European directives are. But one part of it was to require internet filters or copyright filters for all internet platforms.
Mhm.
And the idea was that everything that you wanted to say, or all the music you wanted to post, or sound files, or video, or images, would be run through these filters where people could upload things that they claimed belonged to them, that they held the copyright to, and if it matched something in the database, you wouldn't be able to upload it. So something similar to YouTube's Content ID, but like on steroids. And this was a terrible idea, and a bunch of people who had real problems um, got tricked into thinking that this would solve those problems. That somehow, the problems of artists getting ripped off by their employers, or news companies being ripped off by payment processors and big tech. The two platforms take 30 cents out of every dollar that news platform collects through an app, or being ripped off by ad tech platforms. Facebook and Google rip off 51% of every dollar spent on ads. So if you're ad supported media, more than half of the money that you should be getting is disappearing into their pockets. And these people just got led down the garden path, and we mobilized people in 50 cities to do large street demonstrations. We had the largest petition in European history. It came down to a key vote. We lost that vote by 5 votes.
Mm.
And afterwards, 10 Swedish European members of parliament, members of the European Parliament, said that they got confused and pressed the wrong button, and had their votes changed in the official record. But the way that European votes work is that even if the vote goes one way in the official record, if in the moment the way the button presses add up
Mhm.
goes the other way, then that's how you go. And it just broke me to have come so close.
Mm. I think 5 votes. Oof.
Yeah.
Oof.
Well, and that we won ultimately by 5 votes, but even so,
Yeah.
we lost. It's just crazy. I'm actually about to do a remote gig for a bunch of Swedish policymakers, and I was talking to the people running it today about what I was going to say to them. I was like, I am definitely going to call out those MEPs because I think I think it was bullshit. I think they had a bunch of corporate backers who wanted one thing, and they had constituents who wanted something else, and so they gave the corporate backers what they wanted, and then they had the shuck to convince their constituents that, oh, they just like fat fingered the wrong button. I know that sounds conspiratorial, but it stretches credulity to think that these 10 people all just pressed the wrong button in that one vote.
Well, I do want to talk to you a little bit about interoperability.
Yeah.
I keep saying it wrong.
Interoperability. Let's just call it interop. I mean, it's worse because the thing that I'm specifically into is adversarial interoperability, which like terrible, just
You say that in the
terrible. Like
book. You're
no
like,
one
this
should have
is
to
a
say it.
wank, super wonk term. But
Yeah.
what is interoperability, and why is tech doing to control it? What can we do as consumers to enable more interoperability?
So yeah, so interoperability like is either really simple or really complicated depending on how you think about it. It's like what is, but interop is fundamentally the ability to make two things work together. So like any light bulb will work in that light socket of yours. You can put any clothes in your dryer, wear anyone's socks with the shoes that you've got on. You can open a Microsoft Word file in Google Docs and then save it and reopen it in iWork or LibreOffice. That's interoperability. And interoperability can be managed through formal standardization. So there are like groups of people who gather in rooms all around the world to argue about what like the screw thread on a light bulb should be so that every light bulb works in every light socket. It can be done after the fact, just on a kind of ad hoc basis. So like every gas station has got a fishbowl full of 50-cent USB adapters for your car lighter receptacle. And like the people who designed that receptacle never intended for that to happen. The car manufacturer, at least until pretty recently, didn't do anything to facilitate it, but they also didn't do anything to block it. And then there's this other kind of this other kind of interoperability, this adversarial interoperability. Think of it as like hacking. It's reverse engineering, scraping, bots. So it's things like when Apple was about to be crushed by Microsoft in the early 2000s because Microsoft wouldn't release a working version of Office for the Mac. So you would like get files from your Windows using colleagues, but you couldn't open them on your Mac, or if you could and then you save them again, they couldn't open them, or the fonts would be all wrong or be corrupted. And the way that Steve Jobs fixed that was not by like begging Bill Gates to fix this crummy software. He just had some of Apple's staff reverse engineer the file formats for Microsoft Office. And they released the iWork suite, which is pages, numbers, and Keynote, which can read and write Microsoft Office files, Word, Excel, and PowerPoint. And they just went ahead and did it. And that adversarial interoperability is something that is always latent in anything that's digital, because the only computer we know how to make, and this is getting into some computer science stuff here, but the only computer we know how to make is the Turing complete von Neumann machine, which is a lot of computer science jargon that just means a computer that can run every program we can write. So all the computers in your life, right? The singing greeting card, cheap microchip, the thing in your smart thermostat, your phone, your laptop, they can all run all programs. Some of them are more powerful than others. Like it might take, some of those computers 10 million years to like boot up Photoshop, but give them enough time and enough storage and they can do it. And what that means is that you can always design modifications after the fact for computers that allow you to do things that the manufacturer didn't want, right? To run third-party ink or install apps of your choice on your iPhone, or, read your Word files with a program that Microsoft didn't make, or leave Facebook or Twitter, land somewhere else like Mastodon, and still access the people and the messages and the communities and the customers that matter to you on those old services. And there's nothing that a tech company can do to prevent you from doing that technically. There will always be ways around whatever technical barriers they insert. But as you heard in that excerpt you read, as the tech sector became more concentrated, as it turned into what Tom Eastman calls 5 giant websites filled with screenshots of text from the other 4, we got to this point where it's basically illegal to do this stuff. Like Apple, when they did it, that was progress, but when you do it to them, that's theft. And
Mhm.
they will nuke you until you glow. They'll bomb you until the rubble bounces. They'll say you violated the Computer Fraud and Abuse Act, the Digital Millennium Copyright Act, tortious interference with contract, patent, copyright, trademark, and you know, there'd be nothing left of you by the time you were done. And so this is the juncture we've arrived at now, where tech platforms have made it very hard for you to leave once you're on them.
Mhm.
They lock up your media, they lock up your friends, they lock up your files, and because they know you can't leave, they can abuse you without losing your business. And so they do, not because they're sadists, but because it's a way of shifting some of the value from you to themselves.
Um, it's funny you talk about, these tech companies that keep you on the platform. I, was an early user of Facebook and definitely uploaded numerous photos to the site, with phones and cameras that I no longer am in possession of, as these things also become outdated and unusable. And then I was banned from Facebook. They
Mm,
deleted my account. That's actually how I was on a show with Zuboff. We were on an NPR show about that. It was when Facebook did the big uh, mass exit of a bunch of leftist organizations.
yeah.
I think there was like 30,000 people that got caught up in that, and I somehow got caught up in that for something I wrote using a dead Kennedy's title, "Kill the Poor," about a woman, the woman that Trump had put to death,
Right.
the mentally ill woman Trump had put to death.
Yeah.
Um, and it didn't really hit me at first. It was more of an inconvenience. But then when I was like, oh man, all these pictures of my kids, all these videos of me and the kids hanging out and teaching them how to skateboard and all this other stuff, it's gone.
Yeah.
It's disappeared. And that is kind of a reality of where we are right now. Um, I do kind of want to skip ahead to another question I had to you about, owning media. We talked about music, which is something that I still kind of do, not to the level that I did it before, right? But we don't really own these things anymore. Movies, music, for some people, art, photos. Like we think we own these photos, we think they're there forever. I am living proof that they are not there forever. Um, I I long for the days of going to a friend's house and going through, photo albums, which is, such a thing from the past. Um, what do we do about that?
Mhm.
About this new moment that we're in right now? Because I think that's another thing that kind of keeps us tethered to these sites, is that we put so much of ourselves on these
Yeah.
sites.
Well, I think it's important to note that, like, that is not intrinsic to the technology. Like, realistically speaking, there's no reason that you shouldn't have been able to download all that data. And in fact, if you had been in Europe when Facebook kicked you off, you would have had a claim under the GDPR that they would have had to give you back your data. There are like policy answers to this. And one of the things about a rule that says you have to give someone their data even if you kick them off of your service is that, unlike other rules, like you have to stop people from being harassed, which
Mhm,
requires that you first decide what harassment is, and
mhm.
then decide whether something that happened to someone is harassment, and then determine whether the company did everything they could have to stop the harassment. Instead, like, did you give me my data is a really simple question to resolve, right? You don't need a tribunal. It's just like, does Jason have his data? And Facebook says, "Oh no, we gave it to him." And you say, "No, they didn't." And the
Mhm.
court can go, "Okay, just give him another copy. Like, we're done."
Yeah.
Right? So it's to use another wonky term, it's administratable, right?
Mhm.
Like it doesn't require that you build like a parallel system of corporate arbitration to figure out whether the rule is being enforced. Like you can just enforce it really easily. So in some ways, there's some pretty easy answers to this. And so the fact that these answers are so easy points to a lack of political will, not to a lack of technical capacity, especially given that there are other territories where such laws have come into being. And, to a pretty great extent here in California, you would have those rights as well under CCPA. One of the things that I think we need to understand is that tech is not run by fundamentally worse people than it was in the old days when the internet was like objectively better to hang out on.
Mhm.
It's that the same people have fewer checks on their worst impulses. Like
Mhm.
if you speaking about music, if you remember the Napster wars, right? You
Mhm.
had the tech sector, which was much larger than the entertainment sector back then, but it was composed mostly of small and medium-sized companies, right? The companies that the entertainment sector was going after, there were like 100, 150 of them. They were all squabbling. They were all competing. They were all trying to figure out who could give their end users and musicians the best deal. They couldn't even agree on like where to have lunch, much less like what they were going to tell Congress.
Mm.
Whereas the media companies, there were like 7 of them, and now there's like 5.
Mhm.
And even though they were a tenth the size, they had enormous message discipline, and they always went into Congress, they went into Parliament, and they went into the EU with the exact same message every time. And as a result, they kicked tech's ass. And today, tech is like even more concentrated than the entertainment sector was, right? Like they are so inbred, they've got a Habsburg jaw, and they get exactly what they want. And you can tell because it's like 25 years into the internet, and
Mhm.
we still don't have a federal privacy law in the United States. They are really good at getting their legislative priorities. Like there's a right-wing story about regulatory capture, which is that basically like governments are really powerful, so dominant companies will try to capture them, and they inevitably will, and therefore we shouldn't have governments, right? We just shouldn't have regulators. Like we should just let companies do what they want because the worst company is better than that company in concert with the government. It's this super nihilistic idea that like the market will solve this, and your friend will die of cholera after eating at the restaurant where no one washes their hands, and you'll learn better and you won't eat there anymore,
Yeah.
and eventually all the non-cholera restaurants will be the best restaurants in town and everyone will know. And if you want to eat at the cholera restaurant, well, that's up to you. It's this kind of nonsense thing. Whereas I think a kind of well-informed, evidence supported and fundamentally leftist idea of regulatory capture is that firms that are concentrated and large have a much easier time of capturing their regulators than sectors that are big and diverse, and full of squabbling entities, right? Like I want competition in tech, not because, I think competition solves all of our problems. I want competition in tech for the same reason that bosses want to, bring in scabs when you go on strike, because they want you disunified. They want workers to see themselves as not being on the same side as other workers, but to be distinct bodies who have separate interests and shouldn't work in solidarity. I want bosses to feel that way. I want companies to feel like they can't trust each other. That at any moment, one of them is going to stab the other one in the back and look for some special deal in Congress or Parliament, and for them to be unable to speak with that one voice. So, on the media side, like one of the forms of regulatory capture that we're living through now is a general prohibition on breaking what's called digital rights management, DRM, which is a kind of encryption that's used to lock media to one ecosystem or app or program. Like every audiobook sold on Amazon's Audible platform, which is the monopoly platform for audiobooks. They have 90% market share. Every audiobook by Amazon's rules comes wrapped up in an Amazon encryption wrapper, Amazon digital rights management. And that file will only ever play on a player that Amazon has blessed and given its keys to, so that they honor all the rules that Amazon set. In particular, they won't let you import audiobooks from rival services. So you have to decide: do you want to keep your Amazon library, or do you want to go somewhere else that's more, fair to artists or fair to fans? And you can't bring your media from one to the other. It's like if every time you bought a CD at like Sam Goody, you had to buy the CD player from them, and it only played Sam Goody CDs, and you could only play them through Sam Goody speakers, and you could only listen to them in a Sam Goody chair under a Sam Goody light bulb. At first, like that's a proposition no one would take up. But once you've got a big Sam Goody collection, you'd be nuts to go and buy
Well,
music
then
at
Apple did it,
Tower.
right? Then Apple did it with
This is what
their
Apple
whole,
did, yeah, with iTunes.
buying everything, Beats, and yeah.
Yeah, and so the crazy thing here is that this is a copyright law that prevents you from bypassing digital rights management. It's Section 1201 of the Digital Millennium Copyright Act. It's a moldy oldie. It goes back to the Clinton era. And under this copyright law, this is going to sound very weird, but under this copyright law, if I write a book and
Mhm,
then I record the audiobook and I pay an engineer to master it
mhm,
and I sell it on Audible to you,
mhm.
I'm not allowed to give you a tool so that you can move it from Audible's platform to a rival platform. And if I do provide you with that tool, I, the person who wrote the book, recorded the book, paid for the book, I commit a copyright infringement that is punishable by a 5-year prison sentence and a $500,000 fine for a first offense. It's significantly harsher than if you were to merely steal the audiobook, like orders of magnitude harsher than if you were to steal the audiobook. So this is a copyright law, but it doesn't protect the proprietors of copyrights. It doesn't protect the people who make the works, the people who invest in the works. It protects the intermediary who wraps the work in encryption. And this is what has led to this lock-in. We hear a lot about format obsolescence, right? Like our someday you won't be able to play these files. We all know that they're like old image files from the Apollo program that they can't find players for. But really what they can't find are like hardware players that can play these giant platters that they store the data on. If they had taken that data and moved it on to whatever the successor medium was, tape, and then moved it from that into hard drive, and from there into like modern hard drives or whatever, those files aren't hard to open. Like digital files are really easy to open. In fact, those file formats are so primitive, you could write a emulator for the computer that ran on them and run it on your smartwatch. Like it's piss easy. Like
Mhm.
hypothetically, there's no reason you shouldn't be able to run all the music that you've ever acquired and digitized on all the computers that you will ever own and all the computers your kids and grandkids will ever own. It's only these legal restrictions on making interoperable players that prevent you from doing it. And it's those legal restrictions that allow the firms to do bad things to you. So Audible is like sticking ads in audiobooks now, and bad things to the creative workers who supply the work. Audible was implicated in a $100 million wage theft scandal called Audiblegate, where they used funny accounting to steal from independent audiobook creators.
Jesus, I didn't know that.
Yeah, this is all in like one nonfiction book back. Let me see, do I have a copy around? Choke Point Capitalism, which I wrote with my colleague Rebecca Giblin. I don't have a copy around. I don't think there's so many. I seriously wrote 9 books during lockdown. It's too much.
Well, you talk about in your book, you talk about Napster, and we talked about it just briefly, like the early days of Napster, and you talk about it as a very friendly environment. And the way you talk about Napster, for me, as someone that created music, was a way I felt about the early days of SoundCloud. Actually, it was
Sure.
kind of this really cool community where you could put demoed material up, and people would critique it. And I don't know what it was about that community. It really wasn't about being rude about what you did, but be really helpful, and even met a lot of musicians that, remix stuff for us. I got a record deal off SoundCloud.
Right.
It wasn't much more still. Um,
Yeah.
it,
I
it,
once sold a article reprint because someone ganked some text I'd written from the internet and used it as word salad in some spam. And an editor got it at the bottom of his spam, was like, "This is very interesting." And he Googled it and
uh-huh.
found me and bought a reprint. So
Yeah, there was something about these communities where they were actual communities where people were sharing. Like you talk about in the book that you grew up in Canada and you were a fan of certain kind of music and you wanted to
yeah.
find it, and Napster, you would just search to see who had the music that you were looking for, and you went through their whole library of music and found you guys had a lot in common, had these great conversations. So before we get to the tough question, what did you grow up listening to? Because you're from the East Coast of Canada, right?
Well, in particular, that was a band called the Phantoms, who were uh, blues band, like kind of hard charging rock and blues band, a
Mhm.
little bit of jump blues as well. There, he's dead now. There was a great Canadian blues musician called Jeff Healey, who used to have an open
Yeah.
mic. Yeah, you remember
Mhm.
him? And he used to have an open mic at a legendary place in Toronto called Grossman's, and you would go and see all the people who show up, and then the ones who are good, you go to their gigs.
Mm,
And the front man for the Phantoms was this just like unbelievably good harp player, like just incredible blues harmonica player.
mm.
And I used to go see them. They played a lot of venues that were pretty casual
Divey?
about checking ID.
Okay. Yeah.
So I got to go see them a lot before I was of age, and then when I was of age as well. And so yeah, when like they imploded the way I guess bands do, but I was able to go and find people who collected their music, and they were just this hyper local, like this band that was really beloved by a group of probably a couple thousand people in my hometown. Uh, and they would play every weekend, hardworking band. And like anyone who had their music on Napster was like someone who probably knew a bunch of people I knew and
Mhm.
went to a bunch of shows that I'd gone to, and liked the same, shitty beer restaurants that I liked, and just like there was, and I was on the road, right? I was on the road then, so like I'd be in a lonely hotel room with jet lag, and I'd find some rando on the internet, and they'd just be someone who like was a hometown guy.
Now, I guess you could say social media kind of keeps that alive to some extent. But you say in that same chapter, you go, the only way you could obtain this music was to go to the show and buy it.
That's right. Yeah.
Um, which for me, I still really covet owning things since we don't own anything. I hate
Yeah.
renting. I do want to get into I don't have you for that much longer. I do want to get into the rent economy that tech is
Mhm.
making us a part of.
Mhm.
Owning music was something that I think, and I kind of hinted at this in the introduction. It's only for a certain kind of person that can afford to do it right and do it
Mhm.
right. They're going to own vinyl. They're going to have the right vinyl player. God forbid they have a Crosley record player in their house. You know.
I got one of those little briefcase ones with Yogi Bear on top.
I don't have anything, dude. I suffer from. I never got a record player because I was like, records are too expensive. I remember as a young person, I'm 46. I remember as a young person, my parents had records, and I loved when my parents took me to other people's houses because I loved seeing their record collection on the floor to see if they had something my parents didn't have, and I would always want to hear it. I loved album art. I still love album art. I love liner notes. I love it all. But even pressing a record is there's only a handful of places that actually press
Sure.
vinyl. The last vinyl that I produced in 2014, we had to wait. I forget how many months we had to wait because Jack White wanted to do a big pressing. And recently, a bunch of people had all their music on hold because Adele was
Yeah, I
real
heard about that.
fired up about pressing up vinyl. And usually when you press vinyl, to give you guys an idea of what the cost is for CDs, it was less than $1 a CD, and that would be like in a sleeve, shrink wrapped, and that's for you, the artist self doing it. We're not going to get into record label costs. That's a whole different show. Um, and with vinyl wrapped, no, not shrink wrapped, because I found a box. Not shrink wrapped. I think it's about $7 per record. That's nothing fancy.
Wow.
That's no colored vinyl. That's no inside liner notes on the paper sleeve. That's a blank paper sleeve and just a regular.
Not even a home taping is killing music logo on there.
Yeah. I remember that. I remember home
Yeah.
taping is killing you, right?
I just bought my first vinyl, and I couldn't tell you how long, but I bought the Stop Making Sense reissue.
Ooh.
And I got to go to the opening at TIFF with Talking Heads in the audience, and go to the after party and meet them, which was just best day
Are
of my
you in
life.
LA?
Yeah, I am. Yeah.
Oh, okay. You're
But
3.5 hours from me in Rockstar Town. We got to go hang out at the Rainbow.
okay. I'm an old guy now. You say you're old. I've got 2 artificial hips and cataracts, so I may not be up for the same kind of shows that I used to be. I can't see anything in the dark anymore. I just fall.
Then we're perfect. We're the perfect audience then for
Yeah.
people at the Rainbow.
Yeah. Anyway, so you wanted to ask about rent.
Yeah.
So rent's a really interesting subject. Yanis Varoufakis has a new book out called Technofeudalism:
Mhm,
What Killed the Internet,
mhm,
or what killed capitalism, rather. And he says, like since the Communist Manifesto, leftists have been saying, oh, capitalism is going to eventually, collapse under its own contradictions and be succeeded by something else. And Varoufakis argues that it was, but what it was succeeded by was feudalism.
mhm,
And that, capitalism was just a transitional stage between feudalism and feudalism. And feudalism gets thrown around a lot. It's like fascism or something, where it's like everyone you
yep,
disagree with is a fascist, everyone who's old fashioned is a caveman, and everyone who's like snobby is a feudalist. But there's like a formal definition of feudalism that distinguishes it from capitalism. And capitalists and feudalists hated each other and like fought
mhm,
wars.
mhm,
A capitalist is someone who wants to own some capital, like a factory, and then send workers to work in that capital, on that capital, and alienate the surplus value created by their labor, right? And get rich off their workers' wages. A feudalist wants to own something that other people need to produce. So, in the ideal feudal arrangement, you have a bunch of peasants who are bound to the land through hereditary arrangements. They can't leave. They own the means of production, right? They own the plow, they own the livestock, they own the seed, they own the
mhm,
threshing machines, whatever. But they owe you tax every year just for owning the land. And capitalists hated this arrangement. They wanted to kick the peasants off the land and proletarianize them so they would go work in the factories. And they wanted the land turned over to like grazing sheep, which would then generate the wool that was the input for the
mhm,
Industrial Revolution. And the feudalists didn't like this. The feudalists really wanted to just have this thing where they're just very genteel. They used to say that like banking is the 336 job. It's or 363. Lend it. What was it? Lend it, borrow at 3%, lend at 6%, be on the golf course by 3 o'clock every day. Like a job that the worst fail son of the dumbest rich guy could do in his sleep, and it would just kind of chug along, right? They didn't really want to do capitalism. They just wanted to have a thing where like it just a passive income, a thing that produced money. And um the income that you get from owning something is called rent, and the income that you get from mobilizing capital is called profit. And the way to tell whether you live in a capitalist society or a feudal society is not whether no one is getting rents or no one is getting profits, but rather when rents and profits come into conflict, who wins? If rents win, then you live in a feudal society, and if profits win, you live in a capitalist one. And Varoufakis says, like, look, Amazon looks like a capitalist enterprise. It's full of capitalists, right? It's full of people who mobilize capital to make goods and services that are then sold on Amazon. All these independent merchants, something like 70% of all the goods sold on Amazon come from these independent merchants. But while Amazon may feel like you've walked into like a bustling, city marketplace full of traders selling their goods, all of those stalls in the market, they're all owned by one guy. They're owned by Jeff Bezos, and he decides what can be bought and what can be sold. Place
mhm,
who can sell in the market, and he takes 51% out of every dollar that everyone who sells in the market makes, and he gets that just for owning the marketplace. And where capitalists want to do capitalist things, like, for example, discount if you buy direct from them, Jeff Bezos actually kicks them off the store if they do that. So they have to let him set their prices, right? This is why one of the reasons everything is so expensive is that every merchant has to sell on Amazon to be viable. They have to give Amazon 51 cents out of every dollar they make. That exceeds their margins by huge, huge amounts. And so they raise their prices on Amazon, but they're not allowed to sell more cheaply anywhere else. So they raise their prices at Target and Walmart and a mom and pop shop and their own website as well. Otherwise, Amazon kicks them off and they go out of business. And so this kind of rent economy, it's not just about music, right? It's about everything is now in this rental arrangement. There was just this thing with Unity, which is the most popular game engine, and Unity became the most popular game engine the way all the other most popular services on the internet got big. They bought all their competition. Google made a search engine 25 years ago and never made another successful product, but bought video, mobile, ad tech, server management, calendars, documents, and so on from other people. They're not Willy Wonka's idea factory. They're just like rich Uncle Pennybags, and they go and they buy everyone else's ideas. And so, Unity is the biggest service on the internet. Game developers spend millions of dollars developing games on Unity's platform and then selling them or giving them away to people. And Unity announced, oh, we've got a new arrangement where every time someone downloads a copy of a game you made with our tool, we're going to get some money for it. And in most cases, or many cases, it was going to exceed the amount of money that the game developers got. And game developers staged a revolt. And it was a rare example of success from public outcry, because oftentimes companies take the Lily Tomlin approach. We don't have to care, we're the phone company. But in this case, they actually caved. And the CEO who just resigned in disgrace, when he caved, he went on a podcast and he said, look, it's clear that the amount of money we were asking for as a share of the revenue you generated with the products you made with our tools was too high, but we need to find a sustainable amount that's fair to everyone. And this is like saying we just need to find a sustainable arrangement whereby the guy who makes the guitar strings gets a royalty every time you sell a record. And the guy who made paintbrush gets a royalty every time you sell the painting. And the guy who made the hammer gets a royalty every time you renovate a house. And it's just rent, right? That is what they want to do. They want to own an asset, and they want to have it so that everyone who wants to make something has to use that asset, and then they charge rent on that asset. And you can see here this conflict between capitalism, which is what is motivating most of these game developers, where they're acquiring capital, hiring workers, relieving them of the surplus value created by their labor working on the game and getting rich doing it. And feudalists, or the Unity owners, who made some capital a long time ago, bought some capital, acquired some capital, bundled it up, created a choke point, and now want to extract rent from capitalists.
Mm-hmm.
And so I think Varoufakis is right. I think we are living in a feudal moment, although there's maybe some people out there who are like historians who are like, that's not feudalism. In feudalism, you also have to raise an army for a king. You're talking about manorialism. And so technically it is manorialism. If you're pedantic, you can go, oh, I think you mean manorialism. But for most people, it's feudalism.
And this isn't just music and movies. This is also things like automobiles, where
$12 seat heaters, thermostats, university textbooks. Now you have to get a download code because they leave all the important stuff out. And then the download expires at the end of the year, and you can't sell the university textbook. It's not worth anything. The university textbook is basically a giant, unwieldy, weighted, distributed download code. It goes on and on. Everything is rent now. Even money is rent. So like, if you want to pay your actual literal rent to your landlord, in most cases, they charge you a fee for paying your rent. There's like a convenience fee for paying with a credit card. And there's a check fee for paying with a check. And there's a cash fee for paying with cash. And like, they're not even pretending anymore. I know mask off is kind of hacky and cliche and cringe and all, but it's pretty goddamn mask off when there's a cash fee.
Which is insane to think about. Like, yeah. And I've heard you talk about the tractors, and you talked about it a little bit. Can you talk a little bit about like these John Deere tractors that say, like, if you have a problem in the field, you're using your tractor. Let's just say you're not a mega large farm, you're a small farmer, you have a John Deere tractor. It breaks down, that happens, something gets caught in it. You can't even just fix it. You have to pay a fee to have a certain service for the tractor. Can you talk a little bit about that?
Well, you can actually fix it. In fact, you're usually expected to fix it. You swap the part, right? You do the diagnostics, you swap the part. It just doesn't start working again until you pay a John Deere technician to come out and type an unlock code. And that same law I was talking about that stops you from moving your Audible books, the Section 1201 of the Digital Millennium Copyright Act, also criminalizes bypassing that download code. And it also criminalizes bypassing the download code that lets you get your seat heater in your car working, or any of those other features that are these pay-per-use rent extraction features. And this was used not just to extract rent from farmers, but this lockdown gives John Deere a whole bunch of edges over their farmers. So farmers who complain about this, farmers who complain about this were told by their service centers, by the local service depot, that they were no longer welcome to use their service technicians, which, fine, right? If you're an obnoxious customer and the business can sling your ass to the curb and decide not to serve you anymore, but you can't fix your own tractor and no one else can fix a John Deere tractor. So they basically brick your tractor for criticizing the company, which is quite a powerful motivator to stay on the right side of them. There are other ways in which John Deere extracts value by having these locks. So the fact that you're not allowed to circumvent the locks and go into the tractor, modify the firmware, extract the data, and so on, means that John Deere can take the data that you generate driving your tractor around your field, because the tractor's torque sensors and humidity sensors generate centimeter accurate grid surveys of soil condition, and they can extract that and sell that into the futures market, where they're making bets on food production in the future based on this proprietary trading information, and they can just extract it from you. They now allow farmers to download some of that data from a portal, but it used to be that you could only get that data as part of a precision agriculture package that you bought from Monsanto. So you would get the seed and the data, which you generated in your own tractor, driving it around with your own two hands around your own field. You could only get that data for the precision ag from if you bought the seed from Bayer Monsanto at the same time. I mean, it's pretty mustache twirly villain stuff, right? But it's the kind of trajectory of everything digital in the absence of something that we do to fix it. And I should mention that this book, along with my other recent nonfiction books, it's only partly about documenting what's wrong. The real point of this book is to explain how to fix it, right? What policy remedies we can have. And earlier you asked me what consumers can do about this, and consumers can't do anything, right? Consumers fix things by voting with your wallet, and voting with your wallet is like participating in a one-party election where anyone you vote for turns out to work for the capitalism party, and the people with the thickest wallets get the most votes. The way that you can do something about this is as a citizen, as a member of a polity. And I like to quote here, when I think about theories of change, from my arch enemy, guy Milton Friedman, who is the guy who designed neoliberalism, was kind of court sorcerer to Ronald Reagan, and he had this idea. People would say to him, Milton, like, you want to abolish all the prosperity of the post-war era and turn us all into like forelock tugging peasants again. Nobody wants to live in the Gilded Age except for rich people, and they're a minority. They're the 1%. So 99% of us don't like that idea. How are you going to convince people to give up all the things that they got from the post-war social net? And he said, in times of crisis, ideas that are lying around can move from the periphery to the center. So our job is to keep good ideas around, so that when the next crisis comes, they can go from being impossible to inevitable. And I like to quote Milton Friedman here because, Satan took him to hell in 2002. And I imagine that when I quote him, he looks up from that spit he's roasting on and just like gargles a curse at the thought of his words in my mouth, around that red hot iron bar that's protruding from his jaws, and that the demons around him laugh and, throw more molten shit at him. And one thing we can say about Milton Friedman is he was right. Like, his ideas move from the periphery to the center in the moment of crisis. And if there's one thing that this tech, top heavy tech landscape of giants who bought their way to dominance and then capture their regulators has given us, it's an absolute surplus of crises. We are lurching from crisis to crisis. And because all we have are dumb ideas lying around, every time we have a crisis, we do the same thing we did last time, but harder, and hope for a better outcome. And so the point of this book is to really articulate shovel-ready policies, not ways that we can shop our way out of monopoly capitalism, or install our software such that we can escape from the bad guys. I mean, there's room for all of that, right? Yes, support the artists you love by buying their work, support free and open source software, get a Mastodon account. All of that stuff is fine, but it's all tinkering in the margins. The way that we fix this is by supporting Lena Khan and Jonathan Cantor at the FTC and the DOJ as they drag Google and Amazon through antitrust hell. It's to look for specific policies around interoperability, reverse engineering, privacy and labor law, and to think about what those policies should be shaped like. What does an administratable policy for interop look like? And that's what the second half of the book is really about. It's about describing what those policies should be, so that when the next crisis comes and your friends say, oh, I don't know what to do, I hope that Congress slaps Mark Zuckerberg around, you can say, look, here's what they should really do to Mark Zuckerberg. Here's what he fears. It's not being dragged up in front of the Senate and, faintly embarrassed. It's like these specific policies, and that's what we should be demanding.
Well, Cory, thank you so much for hanging out with us. Really appreciate you taking the time to talk with us today.
Thank you.
You want to tell people where they can find you?
Yeah, I'm at pluralistic.net, which is a newsletter and blog, RSS feed. It comes out on Tumblr, Mastodon, Medium, and also on Discourse. It's licensed CC attribution, so you can reproduce it commercially if you want to. And my next book, which I do have a copy of after Internet Con, is The Lost Cause. It's a solar punk novel about people who are trying to save the planet, doing battle with anarcho-capitalist seagoing wreckers and their white nationalist militia shock troops. And it's coming out from Macmillan in a couple of weeks, November the 14th. But as you heard me whining about Audible, none of my books are for sale on Audible as audiobooks. Instead, I independently reproduce those audiobooks, or produce those audiobooks myself. And then I pre-sell them on Kickstarter and then sell them everywhere except Audible and Apple Books. So if you go to lost-cause.org, that's lost-cause.org, you can pre-order the audiobook, the ebook, hardcovers. I've done this now several times. It's worked out really well. And I've heard from other authors that it's making them rethink whether they want to continue to be stuck to Audible and trapped in Audible's silo.
Well, again, thank you, Cory. The book is called The Internet Con. It is out now. Check it out. It's a good book. It's an easy read.
It's a national bestseller as of today. It hit the USA Today list. So
there you go. Yeah. So I refuse to believe. Toussaint, can you bring me on the screen, Toussaint? Our producers here, Toussaint. I'm having massive issues with my mouse at the moment that is not allowing me to do anything. See what happens with big tech, people. Big tech destroys everything. I guess Toussaint.
You tried turning it off and on again?
I've done so much while you were talking. You have no idea. Can you say something entertaining, and I'm going to go get a mouse from a different room?
I mean, I could recite Jabberwocky or something.
Sure.
I can vamp. Let me see. What did one snowman say to the other snowman? Do you smell carrots? That's a terrible one. Let me take you through some of the other books. I didn't know I would have to vamp. So The Bezel is the next Martin Hench book. It's out in February. It is the sequel to my book Red Team Blues, which I also have a copy of here, which is about a forensic accountant who busts Silicon Valley finance scams. And in The Bezel, he's fighting with private prison tech. It's a novel about the mid 2000s. Boy, I really wasn't expecting to vamp here. I have horrible jet lag.
Well, it looks like it's not the mouse; it is the computer itself. So
I just got a copy of this. I've been reading it. It's quite good. I recommend it.
Oh God. Well, it looks like we're all having issues. We're all having fucking issues. Even my producer can't get in. It's restreamed the app itself. Well, Corey, you know, you could just take yourself off the screen. Thank you so
Okay.
much.
Good luck with it. Bye,
Yeah.
guys. Good night.
All right. Thank you. Hey, I'm back here. Apparently, Restream isn't letting me do anything. This is a Restream problem. So someone says hackers got me. That's fucking hilarious. I cannot do anything to even end the show. So I'm going to send a message to, I can't even send a message to Restream to tell them to go F themselves. So it looks like we're going to break a record for the longest stream ever because I literally can't end it. And I kind of don't want to have this going on while I live my life, since I live such a horrible life. I can't have you guys listening to it. And it's funny because people from the show are trying to get in and they can't. Like, no one can get in. So I'm going to try to end it. Nope, I can't end the stream. Well, fuck it. I'll ask Toussaint or Quinn if you guys